The adventurers finally made it through White Fawn Forest and arrived at the front gates of Queensgrace. They entered into a town square of sorts, and Soren located a wooden map of different locations. There was a library, a blacksmith, a bazaar, a keep, dungeons, a tavern and inn, and a school of magic. The group walked towards the tavern. While en route, Soren and Vess lagged behind, speaking in Valdekian. They decided they should seek out Dakarth as soon as possible. The party began entering the tavern. Annoyed Soren and Vess were speaking in secret, Stripe closed the tavern doors behind him and chastised the two step-siblings for being rude. Inside the bar, the adventurers saw a Goliath was boxing an orc with a circle of patrons surrounding them. There was also a drunken dwarf in blue armor, a black human knight, and Honesty playing music in the corner, amongst other things in the bar. Seeing the bar itself was unattended, Prince found that there was an opportunity to try and rob it. While he was reaching for a lockbox behind the bar, the Goliath defeated the orc in the boxing match and walked over to Prince and Vecni, introducing himself as the bartender, who the group later learned was named Boomadon. Honesty and Roland had a little chat, and Honesty played a new song for him. Stripe attempted to sneak up on and murder an isolated halfling, but he noticed Stripe's approach and backed away. Everyone in the bar turned and looked at Stripe. The drunken dwarf ordered all patrons to seize the murderous goblin. Patrons attempted to seize Stripe, but a potion he drank earlier in the day made him impossible to grasp, as sweat poured from every pore in his body, making him extremely slick and slippery. Prince and Vecni deceived the patrons and attempted to blame the halfling for the altercation, claiming he attacked Stripe with a knife. Most of the patrons became confused as to what they should do. Stripe jumped out a nearby window and hid himself in a sewer drain. The dwarf, who the party later learned was named Beerheer, grabbed the halfling and searched him, finding a small pocket knife. He ordered the halfling brought to the dungeons. Meanwhile, Sword and Vesiesh were greeted by two sleigh guards, both drow. They offered to bring the two step-siblings to see Dakarth in his chambers. They were escorted into the keep and had a private meeting with Dakarth, who was a drow from Karganeth and Vesiesh's father. Dakarth explained he was sent to Queensgrace by Queen Marathi to kill Queen Inez, but when he infiltrated the castle and Queen Inez was before him, he simply couldn't. He said when he laid eyes on her, he realized he would do anything for her. Dakarth said he realized he had forsaken Queen Marathi and betrayed her by serving Inez, and he expected reprisal for treachery at some point. When speaking of Inez, the typically cold drow uncharacteristically quivered with emotion and feeling. Soren used Identify to examine Dakarth, and found he was under the effect of a powerful magic item. He suspected Dakarth was controlled by some type of charm magic, but the power of the magical effect was so great that it left Soren shaking. Vess and Soren spoke with Dakarth more about the state of Dovah and what led up to Slay occupying Queensgrace. They spoke of how Marathi might take out her fury at Dakarth's betrayal on his daughter, Zombina, or perhaps on Queensgrace itself. Vess and Soren told Dakarth of some of their allies. Vess mentioned Vecni was a high elf from Coldbank who hated drow. Upon hearing a high elf from Coldbank was at Queensgrace, Dakarth spit upon the ground and seemed disgusted. Vess, confused, pointed out Dakarth currently served a high elf. Dakarth looked conflicted and confused at that. Inside the Queensgrace Tavern, Vecni, Roland, and Prince had a chat with Boomadon about the state of Dovah. They learned the Fairy Arose and the Goliath Boomadon were actually dating. Vecni, excited at the prospect of a bar brawl, challenged Boomadon to a fight. The two made a 50 gold wager, while others in the bar began making bets and formed a circle around the two combatants. Vecni convincingly won the fight and emerged victorious, knocking the wind out of the Goliath and driving him to his knees. A while later, Boomadon offered Vecni free prostitutes if she and her friends paid to stay for the night. Vecni agreed and coaxed Roland into spending some time with one of the whores. Roland headed upstairs and waited a bit. He heard a knock on the door and was greeted by Griselda, a half-orc woman. Roland became intimate with Griselda, but he still technically maintained his flower and his innocence. Dakarth led Soren and Vesiesh to the chambers of Lord Camembert, a gnome and the Slay Master of Spells, to speak in private. Soren asked the gnomish lord if he would help teach him magic, and Camembert agreed, directing Soren to meet him at the School of Magic on the following day. Soren told Camembert of the chest he found in the woods, inside one of the gnomish houses. He explained about the dead gnomes, the kidnapped children, blood mist, and Sofritas's kisses. Camembert became very upset at this, and told the two step-siblings that his sister was in one of the houses, and his 7 nieces and 7 nephews must be amongst the kidnapped children. He tasked the two with saving his family. Camembert used his magic to open the sealed chest, and Soren received a staff of healing. The two said their farewells to the little lord and retired to the Slay barracks to rest. While Prince Roland, Stripe, and Blyken were sleeping in their room at the Queensgrace tavern, they were awoken by a ghastly figure. It was the ghost of Captain Herbert Steelgrave, who Roland and Prince had not seen since arriving in Dovah. Steelgrave met Blyken and Stripe for the first time. Blyken made friends with the ghost of the pirate captain, while Stripe was antagonistic towards him. He advised Roland and Prince he had recently seen the misfit bastards with a fancy half-elf, who the party came to believe was King Doken Swiftwater, alongside Melvin, a wizard. From Steelgrave's description, it sounded like the bastards had reached the doghouse in Epona's Bog, which was originally Prince's objective in Dovah. Steelgrave learned the misfit bastards intended to leave the doghouse on the 3rd day of Ilmater, approximately 2 weeks from now. Drow soldiers donning sleigh colors bursted into the tavern. 8 of them hurried upstairs, while 2 more approached the bar. Dakarth entered as well and stood near the entrance to the structure. The 2 drow that approached the bar spoke to Vecni and asked if she was the high elf from Coldbank, in Elvish. Vecni attempted to hide her elven ears and pretended not to speak Elvish, but she failed to fool the drow. They stated they came on orders from the Slay Master of War, Dakarth Termtmeni, on behalf of the Prince and Princess of Ferelden. The 2 drow continued they were taking Vecni into their custody. Vecni fled across the bar and jumped out a window, escaping into an alley. The drow pursued after her. The other 8 drow entered the room where Stripe, Prince, Roland, and Blyken were speaking with Captain Steelgrave. Steelgrave dissipated and disappeared as the drow entered the room. The drow stated the same thing to the 4 PCs that the other 2 drow had said to Vecni downstairs, and told the adventurers they would be placed into custody. Blyken did his thing and asked a bunch of questions. He learned the drow were ordered to bring the party to better accommodations to rest, but that they planned to bring Stripe to the dungeons due to his actions earlier in the day. Blyken held the hand of one of the female drow for a short time, but then realized perhaps he shouldn't trust her. Stripe defiantly stated he would not be going with the drow. The drow attempted to seize the murderous goblin, but he was still under the effect of a potion he drank much earlier in the day and could not be grappled. The drow failed to grab him, and Stripe darted towards a nearby window. The drow slashed at Stripe with their scimitars, badly wounding him, but he was able to get past them and hurtle out of the 2nd-story window, landing hard in the alleyway beside the fleeing Vecni. The 2 adventurers delved into the sewers to escape their pursuers. Meanwhile, Blyken and Roland agreed to go with the drow to the barracks. Blyken and Roland arrived at their new room and observed 2 of the 9 beds were occupied by sleeping forms. Blyken pulled the covers back from the first form and saw a sleeping Soren. He went over to the other bed and pulled back the covers, revealing a sleeping woman he did not recognize. He casted the light spell on her, and she startled awake. She appeared to be a drow, but had the voice of Vesiesh. A moment later, she turned over and then back again, appearing as the Vesiesh Blyken was familiar with. Shortly after that, Vesiesh woke Soren up with dancing lights. Soren, Ves, Blyken, and Roland were reunited with one another. Back in the sewers, Vecni and Stripe were unhappy with how they were treated by the Drow, and dissatisfied that Queensgrace leadership would allow the Drow this much control in the city. They decided to take out some revenge by attacking the civilian populace. The duo traveled to a residential area of the city, far from the keep. Ves lit a Molotov cocktail and threw it onto the thatched roof of one of the houses, hoping to avoid killing the innocent people inside. Stripe used a fire potion that he obtained during the Trial of Tears to set the door of another structure aflame, hoping to kill all inside. The pair then delved back into the sewers. Later, it was confirmed that the home Stripe set ablaze and 3 connected homes burnt down, and 14 halflings died in the inferno. Vecni and Stripe traveled through the sewer towards the dungeons, where they believed their friends were imprisoned. Vecni attempted to scale the dungeon wall with her grapnel, but was unable to do so. Next, the 2 adventurers came up with a new plan. Vecni would pretend she apprehended Stripe and was delivering him to the dungeons. She walked up to the dungeon door and knocked, receiving an answer a few moments later. After Vecni and Stripe tricked Belsanders, the Queensgrace dungeon's jailer, into allowing them into the dungeons, Vecni slit his throat. She used shape water to try and hide some of the blood. Then Stripe removed his tunic. Stripe carved, "What is yours is ours," onto the torso of the corpse in an attempt to frame Blood Mist for the crime. Vecni and Stripe began exploring the dungeons. They came across Little Petey, the halfling Stripe attempted to murder in the Queensgrace tavern, locked in a jail cell. The pair entered his cell, and, using his daggers, Stripe savagely stabbed into Petey's eyeballs, killing him, and covering the cell in a bloody soup. The duo continued through the dungeons and found another prisoner, Rothschild, a member of the group called Chaos. Vecni released him from his jail cell. Nearby was a door with 3 locks on it. Rothschild told Vecni and Stripe the door led to a lower level of the dungeons, which had not been cleared of beasts since Slay took residence in Queensgrace and refurbished it. Vecni and Stripe decided to open the door to allow beasts to overrun the city, but Vecni was only able to open 2 of the locks. Rothschild advised the pair he had stashed explosives near Widow Falls, and they could use those to blow the door. He further explained he had traveled to Widow Falls to use the explosives to seal a cave entrance he believed led to another plane. Rothschild added he was asked to do this by Chaos leadership. Vecni, Stripe, and Rothschild left the dungeons and retired to the sewers where they rested. The next morning, Vesiesh, Soren, Blyken, Roland, and Prince awoke in the Queensgrace barracks. They discussed the events of the previous night, and Soren expressed concern he had over Stripe being loose in the city. After the adventurers chatted for a bit, Soren and Ves told the rest of the group to stay put, while they went ahead to meet with the Royal Council. Stripe and Vecni awoke in the Queensgrace sewers. Stripe's personality seemed to have undergone another change. He seemed very concerned with obeying the law and returning Rothschild to the proper authorities. He bound the sleeping Rothschild's hands. Stripe and Vecni discussed turning Rothschild in. Stripe wanted to do it immediately, but Vecni convinced him to wait until they reunited with the rest of the adventurers. Meanwhile, Ves and Soren were ushered into the Queensgrace Royal Council chamber. They stood before the Royal Council and were introduced to each one. Queen Inez Cordova, Hand of the Queen, Lord Shilter, Slay, Master of Research, Master of Spells, and Lord of Fine Cheeses, Lord Camembert, Slay Spymaster, Lady Arose, Slay Master of Coin, Joey McCriggins, Slay Master of War, Dakarth, and the First Ranger of Slay, Kevlian Greystone. After introductions, Soren and Ves approached the dais. Shilter explained how a fortnight passed Slay and other factions battled against Forte. He continued during the battle. Karaganda, one of the Forte leaders, dropped 3 keys. Shilter stated the keys seemed important to Karaganda. He said Slay was able to recover one of the keys. Shilter continued Slay had since learned all 3 keys were required to enter the labyrinth beneath Pridecutter Keep. He explained he would imagine King 1 would want access to the labyrinth, so he can get the rest of his reinforcements from the Fringe north to King Lorien's Valley to join the Greater One host. Shilter offered to give Vest and Soren the key Slay possessed if they carried out some tasks for the Royal Council. Joey and Camembert tasked the pair with convincing the lizard man, Snorian, of the faction Frank to support Queen Inez's claim to the throne and ally with Slay against Vigor. Kevlian Greystone stated he led the Slay side of the attack on Forte. He showed Vest and Soren the key he had in his possession that was recovered from Karaganda, an emerald key with a lion's head handle. Kevlian tasked the two with undergoing a ranging mission. He stated in the Birdhaven graveyard there was a huge tomb. The tomb was wrapped in chains of a magical nature, and a mix of celestial and demonic writing covered magical parchment paper, which was also wrapped around the tomb. Kevlian and his men had been unable to open it. He asked the PCs to help find out what was secreted inside. Kevlian further explained one of the abyssal words was deciphered, and it read, blank. Kevlian said he does not know what that means. Kevlian continued there was a Chaos Lord named Monster residing in the Birdhaven ruins. He explained his rangers could not get into the ruins, but maybe the players could. Kevlian added Monster wore a necklace around his neck with a pink, cube-shaped pendant. He believed this might have something to do with the tomb. Kevlian warned Soren and Vest to be wary, as Lord Monster was an extremely dangerous sadist, and he would look for any reason to put them into pain. Kevlian also asked Soren and Vest to report to him if they found Blackwing or Hainsworth of Chaos, as he intended to kill both of them. He said he had other rewards aside from the key if they could do this. Lady Arose tasked the pair with finding a blacksmith named Tiger Keg in Vigor Valley City. She retrieved a ring from her pocket with a clear stone in the setting. She asked the pair to have Tiger Keg forge a tiara using the ring setting for it. Arose used her magic to levitate the ring through the air and over to Vesiesh. Arose also requested the pair ask Lord Weald if he knew anything about Blank or 33 as well. Joey asked for a favor from the two adventurers. He explained he had a list of supplies for the Builders Guild and a manpower request for the Mercenary Recruiting Office in Vigor Valley City. He asked the PCs to deliver both. Arose used her magic to levitate both documents over to Vest and Soren. Lord Shilter tasked the duo with bringing the Queen's Justice to Lord Stars and Lord Monster of Chaos for talking disrespectfully of his queen. He wanted both of their heads. Lord Camembert explained he had heard the number 33 often in his research. He believed it had something to do with another plane, but he was not certain. Camembert explained that Sang Citadel in King Lorien's Valley had a great basement library and laboratory, where there should be research and old tomes related to such things. Perhaps the answer could be found there. He asked the players to check it out. Camembert also advised the pair he believed there was a hidden dock underneath the sewers of Vigor Valley City. Submerged in the water there, he believed there would be an opening leading to a cave. He asked the adventurers to find it and investigate what was in there. He added he read in his texts that there may be something relevant to his research. Camembert requested the two bring back any relics or artifacts that they were able to find inside. Dakarth stated when Slay took over Queensgrace and began to rebuild the fallen keep, they found the dungeons were overrun with creatures. The second and third levels had not been culled of the beasts. He asked Soren and Vest to clear the dungeons out for additional rewards. After the Royal Council was finished with their requests, Vest and Soren addressed Kevlian. They explained they were sent by the leadership in Ferelden to find and unite the Order of the Burning Fist against a threat to the world. After some discussion, Kevlian agreed to do so when the time came. He also divulged that the former Order of the Burning Fist member, Zombini Indara, was currently serving in the Army of One as the Master of War, and the former member, called Odoacer, was in Vigor leadership and was one of the Fury Lords of Vigor. Vess asked Inez to sign the ally ledger and pledge herself and her vassals to aid One. The Queen was non-committal in this. Meanwhile, back at the Slay barracks, Roland and Blyken became quite bored sitting around. They decided to explore Queensgrace a bit. The pair happened upon Camembert's School of Magic and entered. On the first floor, they came upon multiple classrooms filled with various races of children, learning various basic magic spells while nibbling various assorted cheeses at their school desks. Roland and Blyken continued upstairs, where they encountered a magical image of Lord Camembert behind a desk. The image offered the duo various magic scrolls, spellbooks, and a few magic items that he had for sale. While speaking with the Lord of Cheese, he advised Roland and Blyken that he used his magic to always keep a close watch on all things occurring within Queensgrace, yet he was unable to see through the eyes of Stripe, nor could he view Stripe through anyone else's. He asked if they could bring Stripe to him so that he could examine the young goblin. Blyken asked Camembert if he could power up his spell focus. Camembert said he would be willing to, but he required the essence of a powerful creature to do so. Blyken wondered where he could find such a beast, and Camembert gave him the key to the second floor of the Queensgrace dungeons. He explained he would find many strong creatures in there, but to be wary, as the creatures he would encounter would be more powerful than those found in Whitefallen Forest. Vecni and Stripe awoke in the Queensgrace sewers. Stripe seemed extremely concerned with returning Rothschild to the Queensgrace dungeon, and in his personality, he appeared to have become a Law and Order-based character. During the conversation between Vecni and Stripe, it became apparent Stripe was unaware he was wanted by the Queensgrace guards. Prince and Vecni discussed traveling to Whittle Falls to retrieve Rothschild's explosives, while trying to convince Stripe, who the adventurers learned was using the persona Eddie, not to return him to the dungeons just yet. Stripe eventually was convinced to leave Queensgrace to obtain the explosives and lead the party through the sewers. While traveling, Stripe observed a portion of the sewers that was crumbling, old, and untouched, unlike the rest of the sewers up until this point. Stripe used an acid potion to melt the grating in the sewer, leading to the exterior of Queensgrace. The adventurers struggled to climb down the 120 feet to the water below. Stripe tied Rothschild to Prince's back, who then began to rappel down the cliff face. As Prince and Rothschild were approximately 50 feet from the bottom, Prince slipped and fell. Prince used Rothschild to break his fall, which killed him. Back in the Slay Royal Council chamber, Vess asked Queen Inez to sign the One ally ledger. Inez agreed as long as Vess and her allies assisted Queensgrace with the tasks mentioned before. Vess continued to speak at length with the Slay Royal Council. Queen Inez agreed to allow Vess to retrieve warriors from the One encampment to assist in the Council's tasks. Lord Camembert provided Vess with a map of the abandoned, Clad Crownlands, and Cutthroat's Causeway regions of Dovah. In addition to that, Camembert marked the map Merciless provided with shortcuts and more efficient paths, cutting travel time within the fringe in half. Vecni, Stripe, and Prince traveled northwest towards Whittle Falls. While en route, they encountered Merciless once again. Merciless told the group she came across hundreds more of the Needle Blights the adventurers battled days ago. And in addition to that, she observed a western path newly cut, leading to a brigand camp holding prisoners. Merciless described the brigand's sigil, which sounded similar to the Blood Mist sigil. Vess sought out and spoke with Lord Camembert again. He allowed her to use message to contact Prince. Prince answered, believing Vess was his god, and said he was en route to retrieve explosives to destroy Queensgrace. Camembert stated he would dispatch the Slay Rangers to capture Prince in order to protect the city. Camembert also mentioned that Honesty sang songs in the town square, accusing the adventurers of several crimes. Prince, Vecni, and Stripe finally arrived at Whittle Falls, where they observed 19 Slay guards apparently guarding the falls. The group fanned out and searched for the explosives. While searching, Stripe discovered a rock marked with the painting of a brown snake. Behind the rock was disturbed earth. Prince dug up the loose earth and uncovered 9 wooden crates of 12 dynamite sticks each, weighing approximately 50 pounds each. Rowan and Blyken continued their conversation with Lord Camembert's image in the School of Magic. When asked, Camembert stated he had never heard the name Lusago, but reiterated he believed there might be research on 33 in the library beneath Sang Citadel in King Lorien's Valley. Blyken purchased 5 potions of healing from Camembert for 250 gold. Blyken then asked Camembert if he could see into the uncold areas of the Queensgrace dungeons, and what was the most powerful beast found there. Lord Cam answered there was a beast he was unfamiliar with, an intelligent demonic creature, large, wielding a double-bladed battle axe, and wearing a helmet with a long horn pointing straight into the air. When Blyken asked if he and Roland were powerful enough to face the creature, Camembert answered it did not matter, as the 2 of them alone weren't strong enough to make it that far into the dungeons. He added, mercenaries had tried previously to clear the dungeons, but were unable to do so. Lord Camembert continued to speak on the beasts in the dungeons and divulged there might be some kind of active demon portal, causing new beasts to arrive in the dungeons as time passed. After their conversation was completed, Roland and Blyken decided to seek out the rest of the party. As they traveled through the town, they uncovered wanted posters for Stripe and Rothschild, as well as a curfew notice. Roland and Stripe first traveled to the Queensgrace dungeons. After speaking with the guards, Roland and Blyken learned of a group of 6 adventurers who attempted to clear the dungeons a few weeks ago. According to the guards, all 6 adventurers were slain near the entrance to the 2nd level. Roland and Blyken then searched the sewers for their friends. They were able to follow the trail of Prince, Stripe, Vecni, and Rothschild. Roland and Blyken tied ropes together and descended down the castle walls outside the city. Roland fell and nearly died, again, while climbing down the ropes, but his armor of agathis gave him some protection and he survived. After having descended the walls of Queensgrace, Blyken and Roland quickly picked up the trail of their missing compatriots. A short distance from their descent, the adventurers discovered Rothschild's floating corpse. After reviewing the wanted poster he obtained in Queensgrace, Roland surmised the corpse belonged to the wanted man. He sawed off Rothschild's head with his dagger and brought his head with him. As Blyken and Roland followed the trail, they observed a landing that seemed like a perfect place to rest. On the landing, Blyken saw a treasure chest and attempted to open it. The chest released copious amounts of dust, forcing both Roland and Blyken to fall unconscious for 2 days. Back with the other group of party members, Stripe woke up as a new personality, May. May seemed to be depressed and tried to kill herself with alcohol poisoning. Later, Blyken and Roland woke up near the treasure chest they found 2 days earlier. Blyken was unable to resist attempting to obtain gold, and he ended up inhaling more of the dust, falling unconscious again. He passed out in shallow water and swallowed some of it. Luckily, Roland was able to expel the water from Blyken's lungs, keeping him alive and later waking him up. Merciless appeared again to Vecni, Stripe, and Prince. She reported the group was being pursued by at least a dozen Slay Rangers, led by Kevley and Greystone. After her report, Vecni and Stripe saw Roland and Blyken in the distance approaching them. May continued to drink and fell unconscious from all the alcohol that she consumed. The adventurers traveled away from their pursuers and back towards the front gate of Queensgrace. After shaking their pursuers, Roland and Vecni arrived back at Queensgrace and reunited with Vesiesh. The group discussed their next move. Ves disclosed her true mission to the rest of the party, reuniting the Order of the Burning Fist and joining with them to defeat a vague worldly threat mentioned by Ves's mother, the Queen of Ferelden. It was decided the party would seek out all members of the Order, despite them being spread around the kingdom and fighting for different factions. The adventurers discussed the multitude of quests given by the Slay Royal Council. They decided they must attempt to complete some of the quests to gain Queen Inez and the formidable forces of Queensgrace as allies in the war against Vigor. The group decided on one of the quests, bringing the Queen's justice to Lord Monster and Lord Stars of Chaos. The adventurers returned to the Royal Council chamber to speak with the council once again. After briefly speaking to the council, the party stopped by the Queensgrace Bazaar to make some purchases. While there, Mala, an old woman, tried to sell Roland a deck of cards for 8,100 gold. After determining she was being deceitful, he declined. The trapper that Vecni was doing business with offered to purchase Mulbrax's spear for 50 gold, but Vecni decided not to sell it for that price. A short time later, Vecni stopped by the Queensgrace blacksmith. She sold both Danny's mace and Mulbrax's spear to the head blacksmith there for 300 gold. Vecni noticed a special bow hung high in the blacksmith's shop. The bow was called White Widow and was the pride of the blacksmith. After being crafted by the head blacksmith, Lord Camembert imbued it with a magic capable of incapacitating foes. The blacksmith stated that he styled it after the bow belonging to a Munronian vampire hunter of legend. He said the bow would cost 8,000 gold to purchase. After some haggling, the blacksmith agreed to augment Vecni's whip with some fine spikes for 145 gold, and a bottle of Roland's Nectar of the Sea. Ves asked Descartes for some money to help the group, and he gave her 1,000 gold after some convincing. After the party finished their business at the blacksmith, they returned once again to the Queensgrace tavern. After a bit of drinking, eating, and tomfoolery, the group set out to find the Blood Mist camp that Merciless spoke of earlier. The adventurers believed the camp was spotted close to Widow Falls, and after obtaining some horses from the Queensgrace stables, the party was able to find the camp easily. Out in front of the camp, the group saw some orcs and fleshy, monstrous creatures mulling about in front of a cabin. There was also empty cages nearby. The party snuck around to the back of the cabin and peered through the window. The inside of the cabin was dark with many doors inside, and a still, old woman sitting at a desk was facing away from them. After getting the woman's attention, she approached the group and hushed them, telling them not to wake the children. Vecni pulled out her sword and tried to stab the old woman. The woman did not appear defenseless, however, as she transformed into a tall, terrible, blue-skinned beast that could wield magic. Roland, Vecni, and Ves battled the creature, with Ves mostly running away after hitting it with dissonant whispers at the start of the battle. This fight was intense and both sides gave all they had. The creature showed prowess in magic and even shapeshifted into mist to fit itself outside the rear window to the cabin in order to keep up the attack on the adventurers. Towards the end of the battle, the monster attacked Roland with a glaive, striking him and taking cold damage from his active armor of Agathis. Vecni saw this as an opportunity to follow up with a short sword thrust, piercing through the creature's chest, killing it. The sound of battle and Roland clumsily falling to the ground alerted the orcs at the front of the cabin. They began to move toward the party's position, but Vesiesh distracted them with Eldritch Blast, confusing them and sending the beasts in the wrong direction. The adventurers entered the cabin and rescued over 100 missing children, comprised of humans and gnomes. All children were under 10, and some were even toddlers. The adventurers fled back to their horses with the kids. Using the 3 steeds and all available saddlebags, Vesiesh quickly escorted the youngest toddlers away from the area, while Vecni and Roland began a slower march on foot back to Queensgrace. A few hours into the ride back to the castle, Ves sensed the presence of beings in the trees above her, followed by multiple elvish whispers, reciting the phrase for Hunter's Mark. The party began to escort the kidnapped children back to Queensgrace. While Vecni and Roland escorted the older children on foot, they were harried by a group of hyenas and gnolls. Vecni detonated a stick of dynamite to scare the hyenas back, which worked for a time. Meanwhile, Ves and Soren were riding much more swiftly towards Queensgrace with the smaller children in tow. They were stopped by a group of sleigh rangers, led by First Ranger Kevlian Greystone. After a brief conversation, Soren and Ves went ahead to escort the children towards the city, while Kevlian and his rangers went to assist Roland and Vecni with the lot. Roland and Vecni's group were attacked again. This time, a large group of hyenas, led by more gnolls than before, descended upon the adventurers. Over a dozen of the children were killed and their bodies carried off by the feral attackers. This had a cost, however, as a number of the hyenas and even 3 gnolls were slaughtered by the experienced pirate and the steadily improving Hexblade Warlock. A short time after the attack, Vecni and Roland met Kevlian and his men. The adventurers and the rescued children were escorted the rest of the way to Queensgrace without incident. Last episode, Soren, Vesiesh, Vecni, and Roland were given a hero's welcome for returning most of the missing children to Queensgrace. The group crossed the Queensgrace courtyard and entered the royal council chamber to speak with the council. The adventurers were rewarded with 3,200 gold for their service, saving the children from bloodmist. While accepting the reward, Roland and Vecni were antagonistic towards Arose, which displeased the council. While the adventurers parted with the royal council, Soren asked Arose to accompany him to Camembert's School of Magic, and she agreed. As the pair walked towards the magic school, Soren divulged all he knew about Stripe, which pleased the Slay Spymaster greatly. Soren and Ves entered the School of Magic, and Soren went upstairs to speak with the image of Camembert. Soren used his wit and cunning to haggle down the price on a scroll of Fireball, which he then purchased, planning to inscribe the powerful spell into his spellbook. The group visited the Queensgrace Tavern once again. Ves, trying her best to emulate Vecni, walked in like she owned the place. The bar was crowded, and she demanded Beer Here give up his seat to her. He made lewd, sexual comments to her, so she immediately slammed him with an Eldritch Blast. The two got into a rather serious bar fight, with some interference from Vecni and Roland. Ves defeated the experienced dwarven soldier. Vesiesh and Vecni riled up the Goliath bartender Boomadon and tricked him into a bare-knuckle boxing match with Roland in order to toughen Roland up a bit. Roland was utterly crushed in the physical contest. Later, Roland was reunited with Gitzelda. After spending some time talking, the two decided to make it official and became boyfriend and girlfriend. Lady Arose sent her royal messenger, Fenalt, to each of the heroes with separate invitations to a grand feast in their honor for rescuing the missing children from Bloodmist. The heroes were each allowed +1s, and Roland invited his girlfriend, Gitzelda, to join the festivities. Roland made a 75 gold donation to the Queensgrace brothel in exchange for his girlfriend getting a night off. The adventurers visited the garment shop, Ted's Tuxedos and Dresses, to pick out fine clothes for their special night out. The group, with Gitzelda in tow, arrived at the royal council chamber, and were then escorted to the royal banquet hall for the grand feast being held in their honor. Soren used his prestidigitation spell upon arriving, giving his group a grand entrance filled with fireworks and a dazzling spectacle. Immediately afterwards, at Soren's suggestion, all partygoers observed a moment of silence in honor of the children that did not survive the march from the Blood Mist camp to Queensgrace. The adventurers spoke with the nobles and enjoyed the party. Vecni conversed with a high elf military official and discussed her position on the Drow of Harganeth. The official told the story of Dakarth and his troops arriving in Queensgrace to assassinate Queen Inez, but he ended up swearing his allegiance to her instead. Roland and his allies talked to Beerhear and Camembert about Snorian and Frank, as well as Hainsworth and Chaos. Boomadon and Vecni danced, while Honesty played a new song, a regaling tale of the heroes saving the children of Queensgrace from the vile Blood Mist. Later, Lord Shilter made a surprise announcement, and he called forth suitors for each of the heroes to line up to propose betrothals. Both of Vecni's suitors were Drow, and she spurned each of them. Soren met his two suitors, a common-born human woman named Stefania, and Ragavad, a dwarven woman of House Harrington. He spoke with both women at length. Vesiesh met her first suitor, the cousin of Queen Inez, who spoke of joining his great house to House Swiftwater. While making his proposition, his arrogant demeanor led him to unintentionally insult Vess's house. She summarily dismissed the man. Vess's second suitor, Bargus, was a young half-elf merchant, but he did not live up to her expectations either, and she turned him away as well. Roland's first suitor was Cassandra, a brunette human woman with a warm smile and demeanor. Roland stayed true to Gazelda and turned the woman away, leaving her in tears. Roland rejected his second suitor as well, a high elf woman and Lord Shilter's sister, who was monotone and seemingly uninterested in the affair. Finally, the last of Roland's suitors approached him, a pair of teenaged girls. One of them was demure and seemed to be trying to seduce Roland, while the other girl was quite rude and insulting. After a brief conversation, they presented Roland with a gift. It was a small finger in a black box. The girls told Roland they were from Blood Mist, and they still had Camembert's only missing nephew, Tucker, in their captivity. It was explained they would ship Tucker off to Sophrita's kisses unless he and his allies did a task for Lord Craven. Further, the young girls told Roland if he was to harm them, the boy would be killed. The girls asked Roland to obtain the 3 keys leading to the labyrinth beneath Pridecutter Keep, and to open the way so Blood Mist could exit the Fringe and return to the Abandon. The 2 Blood Mist agents left the feast, and as they exited, a third person joined them, a middle-aged looking human with a white goatee and a red suit. Roland alerted Lord Camembert as to what transpired. Camembert used his powers to watch as the trio left Queensgrace. The middle-aged man removed his own face, revealing he was actually Lord Craven in disguise. Lord Camembert tasked Roland with rescuing Tucker at all costs. Soren spoke more with Ragavad, who offered a betrothal and the joining of houses Harrington and Swiftwater. Soren did not commit to the betrothal, but left things open for a betrothal in the future. Soren spoke further with Stefania, who would lavish praise on Soren and his father, King Dogen. Soren explained there was only one woman he loved, and she was his mother, the Queen of Ferelden, Genlia Avicine. Soren told Stefania his mother's blessing would be required for any betrothal, and spoke of possibly having Lord Camembert transport Stefania to Ferelden to meet the Queen. Soren spoke with Camembert about casting the spell, and he agreed. Camembert explained he would make the preparations on the morrow, and added it would take both he and Lady Rose to transport someone that far. Camembert also stated the spell would leave him without magic and in a weakened state for a few days. Vecni captivated all at the party, telling the tale of she and Roland defeating the Moonronian Armada and Grand Admiral Gamino, impressing all in attendance. The black-skinned knight was overheard talking to the knight in white and gold armor about how he formerly led the 4th Legion of the Silver Swords, the Dark Knights of Vengeance, and how he came to Queensgrace to serve Queen Inez, but was not happy here. Honesty sang a song about Teclis's life and death, while Vecni and Queen Inez danced, much to Lord Shilter's chagrin. Vecni told Queen Inez about Queen Marathi and the sack of Coldbank, and pleaded with her not to trust Dakarth, but Inez insisted he was loyal to Slay. Vecni and Inez discussed potential husbands to sit beside the queen. During the discussion, Vecni learned Inez did not care for love. She only cared for increasing her power so she could claim vengeance on Vigor for murdering her family during Vigor's conquest. Vecni and Inez bonded, as Vecni also dreamt of vengeance. Vengeance on the Drow Queen that destroyed her homeland.
Thanks for watching this episode of Power Word Nerd. Be sure to follow us on all social media sites.